When somebody says that's just your interpretation, the first thing you've got to do is ask yourself, where is this coming from? Where is this objection coming from? It might conceivably be a serious desire to engage about postmodern epistemology and talk about whether it's possible to know anything and under what conditions can one know anything, even if one cannot know anything exhaustively with the perfect omniscience of God. Surely one can know some things truly up to the level of human capacity and so on. It could be an invitation to serious conversation of that sort. On the other hand, sometimes it's merely a flip switch. It's merely saying, I don't want to talk about this, or I think you're just too narrow, or I'm going to show that you don't have any ground to stand upon. It's not a serious request for engagement on the subject at all. In which case, if you try to get too heavy in your response, you just turn people off. So if somebody says that and it's not much more than a desire to dismiss you from the field, I might say, if they say, surely that's just your interpretation, I might say, oh, well, is it your interpretation that interpretations are always subjective? Isn't your interpretation of interpretations therefore subjective? And that's a purely ad hominem argument. It's not really all that serious, but I've yet to see somebody answer it seriously. It shows the folly of the approach that tries to dismiss people with a one-liner. Beyond that, I think that there are some useful things to say, provided you're dealing with somebody who's serious. You can show that in just about every domain of life, we can know some things in measure. If you want to begin to study nuclear physics, or you want to begin to study classical Greek, or microbiology, or carpentry, there are some things that you come to know with time. You might know very little at the beginning of the course, or at the beginning of the tradecraft, but after 6 months or a year or 2 years or 10 years or an apprenticeship, you know a great deal more. You've also come to know all the kinds of things you don't know yet. A great deal of learning consists in finding whole vistas where you don't know much. But as part of getting there, you learn many things about some things, and some things about many things. And that is simply part of human experience. All you have to do is point out that there was a time when you couldn't read, and now you can read. Maybe there was a time when you could read English, but you couldn't read much French, and then you learned the language, and so you could read a lot more French. So it is possible to know more things. And likewise, in the domain of interpretation, there are tricky bits where experts will disagree about what's being said. But if we read John 3:16, God so loved the world, then surely it's possible to know, if you take the text seriously, that God loved the world. Now, you might want to define that more by asking, what does John mean by world, and are there different ways in which the Bible speaks of God's love? And you can ask all kinds of refining questions, but surely it's not a purely subjective interpretation that says this text means that God loved the world. It doesn't mean that God wears nightshirts, or it doesn't mean that God is angry with people all the time. It doesn't mean that God created everything in the beginning. It doesn't mean any of those. It means that God loved the world. That's something that is a valid interpretation of John chapter 3, verse 16. So when somebody says that's just your interpretation, then if you have that kind of reasoning in the back of your mind, you may be able to engage the party in serious discussion. You might be able to say, oh, what's your interpretation? And if they commit themselves, say, well, what does the text say? Let's look at some passages together. And then you're getting them into the text and context of the Bible itself. Well, I think the text means such and such. Well, what about this expression? Is that what is meant? Is this what Samuel means, or whoever it is that you're quoting? So if it's not just a flip question that is designed to shut you down, it is sometimes possible to get the party to engage in serious discussion regarding the text itself. And even if you get them to the place where they say, well, okay, I see that that's what the interpretation of the text is. It's just that I don't like it. I just don't agree with it. And I would reply, well, that's a different argument. If you disagree with it, you're still agreeing that this interpretation is correct, even if you don't like the entailments or the conclusion, or you don't like what the text is actually saying. But that is a faithful interpretation of the text, in which case you're not arguing with me, you're arguing with the one who gave us the text, with God himself.